Hey everybody, it's Nick here from the Orbital Alliance, and I am in Mount Vernon, Illinois for the Total Solar Eclipse of 2024. And more importantly than capturing imagery of the eclipse itself, I wanted to make sure I took the time to meet people who are here to view it as well. And here I am with two fine gentlemen who I met this morning over breakfast, and we got to hear a little bit of their story, and we had a wonderful conversation. And today I wanted to ask them to sit down and do a little bit of an extended conversation so you guys could hear some of the amazing stories that these two guys have lived throughout their lives. There was a lot. I was like, people just need to hear this. It's special, and it has wonderful value to the world of astronomy and space exploration. So here it is. I'm going to introduce you guys to both Jim and Bob. So do you guys want to say hello and introduce yourselves to the crowd?
Hello, I'm James Shatzel, Shatzel. Bob and I have been friends for 75 years, and we both started doing our technical work in the planetarium in Chicago. And for each of us, it led to somewhat different paths, but me more professionally, Bob more with observational astronomy. And we have a lot of interesting stories, I think, that will be interesting to you. And I will introduce you to Bob.
Yeah.
And I'm Bob Tobin, and it's been a tough 75 years. I'm from Northwest Colorado, a small town called Meeker, Colorado.
Yeah. And the thing that's particularly interesting about Bob and me is that we met at the planetarium in Chicago.
Adler.
At the Adler Planetarium in Chicago. And we, within a year of being first introduced, we saw a total eclipse of the sun in northern Wisconsin at the time. So we're looking at this trip as kind of a closure for our lives because we're in our 80s now, and we're going to be seeing a total eclipse here, which will be the two bookends.
Yeah.
So we've got it.
See, as I'm talking about, it's beautiful. It was too beautiful. It's incredible. So 75 years of friendship.
Yes.
That's. I think you guys know that, but it's extremely rare.
Yeah. It is very rare.
And just meeting you guys at the table right over there and seeing your banter and interaction, it shows like just the depth of your relationship.
Yeah.
And I value that in my own friendships, and I hope that I get to that point in my life where I can be in the same place you guys are. So you're doing something right.
Well, and the thing that is I'm particularly thankful for having Bob as a friend is I had a medical emergency about 6 months ago. Didn't take him but about 25 hours to drive from Denver to my house.
Yeah.
In Oregon.
Yep.
So that's the kind of friendship you can't get in your lifetime very often.
Yeah, and you said that you speak on the phone every 7 to 10 days, right?
Something like that.
Yeah,
Yep.
give or
We've been
take.
doing that for years.
Yeah, that's
So,
it's that currency, right, of keeping up with
Yeah.
the little things.
We keep trying to solve the mysteries of the universe.
Yeah. Have you gotten any success?
No.
So far?
We
We
have
get more and more
discovered-
confused.
Right. That
Because
seems to be the case, doesn't it?
Yeah, the more we talk about it, the more confused we get.
Well, we found out that we are one of the mysteries of the universe.
that we as human beings are really mysteries.
Right.
But it's, I find that from time to time when I go to sleep, I find if something's bothering me, I just try to figure out how the universe is created in my own mind. And then it brings out a whole flow of information for me, puts me to sleep.
Yeah.
You know? So it's great. Bob has very similar things, I think.
Right.
You know, we
Sure
do
do.
the same thing.
Sure.
Bob and I, when we met, Bob had come down. My father or stepfather was the director of the planetarium at the time. Well, he was the assistant director at that time, but he became director.
At Adler?
And at the Adler Planetarium. And at that time, amateur telescope making was becoming a thing to as an option to buying something, you would build it. And there were books that were published that showed you how to do it, a couple of very good books. And Bob came down and we both started building telescope mirrors, and it turned out that we did it for a number of years. And it turned out that I was selling some of them early. I sold some 4 inches, and 6-inch ones, and 8-inch ones. And I built a Cassegrain telescope for that observatory
I remember that,
in
yeah.
Evergreen, Colorado. Yeah.
And that's
So-
and a cascading the mirror in the back, bouncing the mirror in the middle.
That's right.
And back
Comes
down
back
through
down.
the. Yep.
The guy had actually built an observatory for this thing. And so we built that, and his name was Eisenberg. I remember that. And yeah, I also remember his dog had rabies.
You didn't get it though,
We
right?
didn't
That
get it. When he told us it had rabies, I didn't want to go near the house.
You're right.
You know,
Good call.
So, yeah, so anyhow, so Bob and I built a number of telescopes, and the reason we're going back to the planetarium is we are trying to inform that of what happened in the 1950s, because it's changed substantially with all the space stuff that's gone on in the world.
Right.
And we want to sort of educate them as to what happened and how a number of people pursued careers that we knew, very capable people, particularly women. Mm-hmm. And we were very happy to see that the place turned out some really top quality people.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. When Sputnik was released by the Russians, there was a special project there for monitoring it, and they set up a station for doing that. And of course, now we're at the age where the people we were dealing with are probably mostly gone.
Sure. It's just a reality of time, right?
It is the reality of time. It's kind of sad, and that's kind of why we're going back. This is kind of a final trip for us. And we're looking at hopefully educating these people on what can happen.
Sure.
If you have an educational program that allows people to have some freedom, do what they can do, and makes a big difference in your life.
Well, you never know how many young people will benefit from your efforts to do this part of your
That's right.
your chapter that you're doing, and that's so important. And I think many people miss it.
Yeah.
That opportunity is they just think they've kind of done at some point.
Yeah.
And you guys are making sure you see it through to the finish, right?
Yeah, all the way. And in my case, I chose to stay in the field of optics, and as we've talked a little bit, I worked on the Mars Viking program, which we can go into a little later if you like.
Sure.
And Bob, let him speak for himself, but he did a lot of, take this thing.
No, you're doing fine, Jim.
But Bob was absolutely obsessive about his observations, and he probably viewed thousands of stars with his telescope. over
Not
the years.
stars, Jim.
Well, I mean galaxies.
Deep sky objects.
Deep sky.
DSOs,
I got corrected there.
Galaxies, clusters, and nebulae.
And he has them marked on charts and stuff, and I've tried to encourage him to maybe submit those to some astronomical group where they can put it on real charts that are available for the general public.
Yeah.
But Bob is a shy guy. So.
Nothing wrong with that.
There's a lot of self-protection there.
I know, yeah.
So when you were talking, Jim, about being young and having the opportunity to start building scopes, it was kind of the next chapter for at-home astronomy. Like, and both of you, like, that must have been intimidating. That's intimidating to me to think about. Is just the crafting side of it, and really, and the assembly. Because in my generation, everything's just so pre-made and pre-manufactured. Yeah. You got a box, you order it, it shows up at your door. You don't have to go anywhere to get it. Yeah. But it also excites me to think about the extra level of reward of successfully seeing an image through a scope that you built.
Yeah.
That must have, to some degree, even to you guys, been intimidating.
At the beginning.
What was that like getting into it and learning how to do these things that you had no education about? Like,
well, I think from my viewpoint, I think and probably for Bob's, is it once you started it was a lot easier, number one, than I thought it was going to be. But you learned a lot about the manufacturing of optics is a very precise craft. And the biggest thing you worry about is contamination. You worry about scratches, and you worry about all this stuff. So you have to learn about cleanliness, and then the testing of it became a real issue that we had to learn. Testing was very important. The Foucault test, which is a test to test whether the mirror is parabolic or not.
Yep.
But once you get it done, you get some confidence, and then the next one's a little easier, and the next one's easier.
Sure.
And then you graduate from doing it by hand, because what Bob and I did Well, they're barrels about the size of this, and the glass was put in the
55
center.
gallon jump.
55 gallon.
Okay, yeah,
drums.
that's-
So you could do it in your garage if you wanted to.
Sure.
And just do your stuff here. And
Yeah.
the testing can be done on another bench. And yeah, when you're doing larger optics, it's harder to do by hand, so you have to go to
Yeah.
the machine. So we had at the planetarium, at the Adler Planetarium, we had a machine called the Draper machine, and
Okay.
so I started building larger ones, like 12-inch diameter,
Yeah.
and that's when I built the Casagreens there. And we got a picture of that in that newspaper that we have. And, yeah, we were both semi-celebrities for a while in Chicago. The Chicago papers had pictures of us.
Was it the Tribune, Chicago
Tribune or
Tribune?
Sun-Times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then we have some of the girls that were there that had done their stuff. And, both of the women turned out to be brilliant scientists.
Yeah.
And,
Made us look like morons.
yeah, we were.
Intellectual morons.
That was in a
compared
period
to
where
them.
men were supposed to feel dominant, but at that point we felt diminutive.
Yeah, right. But we're better off with everybody contributing, right? You know,
Oh, they were just wonderful.
Yeah.
And yeah, just wonderful. In fact, I had contact with one of them about 3 years ago,
wow. Yeah.
and so and she became a biochemist instead of an astronomer, but she did fabulously. She has world GMO things that she's done and gotten awards for.
Yeah.
And so I know most of the people that Bob and I knew there, I think, most of them went on to be very successful in their fields of endeavor.
It's
It
incredible.
was unfortunate. She was going to be an astronomer, and she was at the University of Illinois, and her counselor said, well, women don't become astronomers.
Oh man.
And yeah, she was not happy with that.
But she
I
made
wouldn't be
him a
happy
liar.
either. Yeah.
So she said, well, the hell with it. I'll become, and then she chose biochemistry, I guess.
Sure.
And the other one got her PhD in, Miss Bernadette got hers in galactic
astronomy,
physics.
I thought.
Yeah, in astronomy.
Oh, it was. Yeah, that's
galactic
what I thought
physics.
she.
And she taught in Canada. So, yeah, there was a lot of successful people.
Yeah.
There's another guy there that became a scientist for NASA that did a ultraviolet radiometer for some experiments. So a lot of people passed through there that did take the advantage of learning what they did there to their next level of whatever they did, their lives.
Right.
And it was a very good group of people.
Yeah. And you build this, I'm sure you built a network that went so far beyond Adler as well, right?
Well, for instance, Bob and I were immediately friends, and then there were two other guys. There were four of us that became very close friends, and so we traveled together for years and did lots of things together.
Yeah.
So yes, it became a good experience for all of us, socially as well as technically.
But not intellectually.
Well, that's right. We were stunted for a while. Yeah. So, but yeah.
Yeah. So looking a little bit ahead in the timeline, can we start with you, Bob? Your beginnings of your education, like college education, and the career that you began and where that went. Can we hear a little bit about that?
Like most young men, we don't know what we really want to do.
Yeah.
And so I was off and on between attempts at education and attempts at jobs. And by the time I finally finished this off and on, I graduated with a bachelor's in geology from UCLA at age 30.
Yeah.
And then I was able to move forward in life. But as Jim was saying, my experience at the Adler Planetarium and the people we met there was so constructive and so directive for me. I just loved it.
It was a great experience for all of us and helped us grow in lots of different ways. And one of the ways was the four people that we were. You couldn't have gotten four people with more divergent opinions.
Yeah, right.
We were like the squares, the corner of the square.
Yeah.
But we could have open and honest discussions, screaming, yelling. It didn't matter. And it never bothered us.
Right.
You had to have a sense of humor, though.
Yeah. That's the secret.
And it was great. It was great.
I feel like these days that's ever more difficult to achieve with people because it's just such a volatile temperature and daily conversation and even in common relationships. But
Right.
I love to hear a success story.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that you can get past that and just be together. You know?
Yeah, and it was just that way. I don't think we ever had anything that even came close to destroying any of the relationships we had.
So, as you've grown and lived your life together as friends and as colleagues, you probably have had a whole tome's worth of fun experiences related to astronomy, both with your career and just recreationally. What's maybe one thing that you guys did together, like an eclipse? You mentioned you guys saw that eclipse a long time ago together.
Right. Yeah.
Is there something else maybe that was like we bonded because of space?
Yeah, we visited Yerkes Observatory up in Wisconsin
Right.
a couple times and really enjoyed that trip.
Because we lived apart in terms of our marriages and families. Bob was in Ohio for a while. I was in California. He was in California. It was all over. But we always kept in contact, and fishing became a part of our life.
Sure. Yeah.
And that, of course, had to be competitive.
Yeah. Who's got the biggest
It
catch,
got
right?
competitive after I taught Jim how to fish.
That's right. Had to teach me how. I
Had
really
to
didn't.
know
I
how
really
to cast
didn't.
it.
I didn't know how to do it at all.
Yeah.
And he taught me, and then we became, it was the guy got $1 for the first fish, $1 for the most fish, and $1 for the largest fish.
Now it's $1,000 for the fish.
I wish.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Because I was catching the largest all the time.
Oh, nice. There
But
you
he'd
go.
catch all of them. He was a much better fisherman.
Yeah, Jim did catch the largest fish.
Yeah.
so.
When the apprentice becomes the master.
I know.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly.
Grasshopper.
Yeah, good way to put it.
So Bob did a lot of his geology. You could tell him about that, Bob. What you did for your geology work.
I didn't work in geology.
You were a hydrologist.
I was a
know.
water quality
That's the one thing about Bob.
hydrologist.
It's got to be very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Working for the USGS, so for 25 years was a great experience, and I got to move around a little bit,
Yeah.
California, Ohio, and then Colorado.
Yeah.
So
But then after I got out of college, I went to the University of Michigan. And then when I got out of college, I worked for about a year in Chicago at an optics company, which was very good. I made a very good friend who became my supervisor there. And if I had to give anybody advice, this is a case where you learn not to burn bridges and you keep your contacts close.
Yeah.
And it helps you throughout your entire career.
Sure.
I had job offers 20 and 30 years later that all I had to do was call this guy, and it was an automatic thing.
Wow.
It was just amazing. So I learned a lot from this guy. And so I got a job offer in California, moved to California, and did what they call solar simulators, which were used for testing solar cells and testing the first Mars lander was tested with a solar simulator, simulated being at space with a particular company.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
feel free to rest your arm, and it gets exhausting
you're
though.
lowering your
Yeah.
voice, Jim.
Yeah, well, you know me, I can't lower my voice, But yeah, so and that became, and then I took a little deviation to design lenses, actually physically with computers and stuff, and that was fascinating. I worked for Technicolor for a while,
Oh yeah.
and so I got some commercial experience, so to speak.
Sure.
And then I worked with lasers at a company in the Bay Area, and then worked with what I consider my crowning achievement, which is the very first Mars landers. I was the optics guy on that.
So they can hear your words.
There you go.
I'm the optics guy on that, and a fellow by the name of Julius Dischler and I were in charge of the cameras, and I was in charge of the film reproducer.
Wow.
For bringing back the photos from Mars and generating them. And I was there about 3.5 years, so I lived through the engineering design, manufactured the first units, and then I left. I wasn't there for the final, but I was invited to the landing, the first landing at JPL, so I felt
Yeah,
good about that.
for sure. Oh,
You know?
who wouldn't? That's
So, and I have a lot of certificates from that, and I'm just very pleased. It's the one, I think, from my viewpoint, the one thing that I can look back with some pride, you know, and it was very good.
What did it feel like to see your work function and to get the results back in imagery
It
form?
was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
What was that experience like?
Well, the experience was good. It would be better in today's world because the quality of the cameras had improved so much in these recent landings now. And the kind of detectors we had to use in the first one were very minimal and very low resolution by compared to what they have today.
Sure.
But the fact that we did it was a real achievement. And nobody knew what the environment of Mars was going to really be like.
Yeah.
And so there were things during the design phase that had to be taken into consideration, like when you land and you turn on retro rockets and there's dust blown, what's going to happen to the cameras? Are they going to get covered? Do you put a cover on them? You know,
Yeah.
are all the experiments going to survive? There were a number of experiments on the thing. And it turned out to be great.
Yeah.
And we were everybody was very pleased that worked on that program. And yeah, that's one of those programs that really opened up, and look at how much has been done with the Mars investigations now.
Yeah.
You know? And they're finding, and the resolution today is so much better. Oh,
Of course,
God. It just, I look at those pictures now and I can't even believe them, you know?
Well, the sheer number of cameras that are on the Curiosity and Perseverance rovers.
Yeah.
There's
And
not
all
just
the
one.
flyovers, and
Yeah.
you know, they
Yeah.
can go miles from their
Yeah.
landing sites
And
get to
what's
get
interesting
to
on
see
the first,
geology.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right.
and on the first cameras, with one of the things that everybody was hopeful when we discovered any life on Mars, whether it was crawling underground or whether it was flying or whether it was really there. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know this, but the first lander would have been almost impossible to detect that because there was a scanning in a straight line, and if there was something moving and it happened to be going at a certain speed, you wouldn't be able to catch it anyhow. So we were somewhat disappointed in that aspect of the lander, but
Right.
from the geological standpoint, which would be more interesting to Bob, they wanted to know what the rocks were and whether it's sedimentary rocks or igneous rocks or whatever the hell was there, you know. And that was able to be done, and they had a seismometer and all sorts of instruments on it to detect the geological features of the planets.
Right.
Speaking of geology, as we've been talking here, I couldn't help get distracted, geologically speaking, by the strata in this table.
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering if they were lake deposits or wind-blown deposits or
When we go
whatever.
across country, we're always looking at geological features, determining whether it was a sea or mountains or whatever it was.
Right.
You know, it's fascinating.
Once you learn it, I'm sure the lens, the geological lens, never is removed from your eyes, right? You just start seeing it in all the things. Doug and I were just in Arizona and Utah. We were talking about that this morning, but for the annular eclipse and just driving across the state and seeing all. I wish I had your knowledge.
Yeah, you would love to.
And it made me want to start getting into geology because I was like, there's probably very basic things that would even just warp my entire perspective on the world that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So one day maybe you can teach me some things.
Oh, that's true.
I don't know that I'm much above you intellectually in
Yeah.
geology because I just never have.
Yeah, but the beauty of it is in Utah, there's that road we used to take where every few, maybe 150 yards, they would have a sign about the geological period.
Oh, I sort of remember
Yeah,
that.
and it would tell you whether it was.
Was that
a
Bryce
sea.
Canyon? I think that was Bryce
Yeah.
Canyon. Yeah.
And so
That's a
you'd
wonderful
find
place.
Utah has taken a real pride in doing their stuff.
Right.
Which brings me to one of the questions you had asked earlier today about where they were testing the lander because Mars was a hostile environment, so where were we going to test it? So what they did was they were looking at all sorts of places in the world. Finally chose the Sand Dune National Monument for some of it. Some of it they did right outside the plant. But the problem with the sand is that, like we all know, driving any kind of mechanical vehicle in sand, you're going to have problems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Turned out we didn't have, which was very good. That was very impressive.
Yeah.
And they got $1 million for the first picture.
Yeah.
First
Yeah.
picture gave them $1 million. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Who paid that?
And NASA.
Oh, they did?
Yep.
The taxpayers.
Well, you and I and everybody else paid for it.
Yeah,
You're damn
right.
right. You know?
But now you know photography has a
Yeah.
possible great
There you
future.
are. There's
Yeah.
$1 million place for you there.
Right,
somewhere.
yeah. I'll get my chance one day.
Well, what's interesting in some of the pictures you've taken, in my opinion,
that's
with
very
Bob,
professional.
they're really outstanding.
Thank you very much.
I think that you have a future there. From an old man to a young man, you have a future, my friend.
Well, thank you very much. I
Yeah,
sure
you're
hope
almost
so.
3 times his age.
I know, it's scary, you know? Yeah, it is scary.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was one of our fun things. And then I retired, and Bob retired, and so now, but we still keep up with a lot of the scientific stuff.
Yeah. Well, you were expressing your excitement for the Webb telescope.
Yeah,
And
it's delightful.
how that's been delivering incredible images and
Yeah.
and exciting people about astronomy and space science and that all the different things that go in with that in new ways.
Yeah.
So, and from people who've been working on optics for decades,
Yeah.
I mean, it just must be just amazing.
It is.
to
It's
experience.
amazing. And now they're talking about an even larger telescope than Webb. And they're actually talking about one that might assemble in space,
Oh yeah.
which would even be larger. And then you get rid of the gravitational effects and stuff. But that's down the road, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And
With as many years as it took to get
Just
Webb
get Webb
launched.
going.
Yes.
Yeah, I
The
mean-
delay after delay.
Yeah.
5 years delayed.
well, having worked with NASA and the government on some of these things, Bob having worked for the government, you having worked for the government, it's an expectation that you have to accept.
Right.
It's going to happen. It's
For
just
sure.
going to happen.
Which also is an interesting topic of conversation too, is just the explosion of the private sector within the last 10, 15 years,
Tremendous.
and even within the last 5. Seeing SpaceX, Blue Origin, a whole list of others
Yeah.
rising to the occasion and acquiring the speed that government can't achieve.
Exactly.
They have the knowledge base, but these private sector companies can
Yeah,
kind of
well,
ride off the knowledge.
And I'm confident that the NASA people, and as you point out, private industry is a big help to NASA these days.
Yes.
I'm sure there were frustrations with NASA with the incorporation of the private industry into their business.
Sure.
But at the same time, I think there was a sense of relief because things went faster.
Yes. Yeah.
And they could do things in the private industry that could not be done in the government.
Right.
Not that they couldn't do it, it was just
But the
the
bureaucracy, slows
bureaucracy
you
of the
down.
government
Yeah.
Yep.
just doesn't allow some of this stuff.
For sure. Well, and when your budget's at the mercy of a Senate hearing,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Who
Or a
pretend to
committee in the Senate.
yes, yeah.
and they pretend to understand it, and they don't understand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so, yeah. And
Yeah,
I wish I could be alive another 50 years because it's going to be fascinating.
right. Yeah, we're just probably on the cusp of
Of
seeing some
outer
acceleration.
exploration. You know, the things you talked about this morning, like capturing particles from a comet or from an asteroid, or what. Yeah, just the complexity of landing on an asteroid to me is just unbelievable.
Oh yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
just unbelievable. And the mathematics of orbit calculations just blow your mind away.
Right.
You know, you got all these moving particles, and you got to hit it right, and it's a little bitty object. I just can't even believe it. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Pinpoint precision.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, we ought to be really thankful that we have that capability.
Right.
You know.
I'm going to shift gears just a little bit towards the event that we're here for.
Yes.
So you're living in Oregon.
Yes.
And you're living in Colorado, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So you guys you met up in Colorado by your home, correct? And then drove in here? Is that how
I flew into Denver,
in Denver, right?
and he picked me up.
And then I drove across Colorado and picked him up at DIA, and then we drove here.
Yeah. I had to keep him awake.
Yeah.
You know? Gee.
Right.
But he fell asleep doing it.
But I had to. I
Yeah,
said,
he's the one
Bob,
that slept.
don't worry about it. I'm going to just take a little nap about an hour later. I'm saying, well, we're
We were saying this morning, like, thank goodness for cruise control. It was,
he's the cruise control.
Yeah.
He's a definitely fixated on having control of his car.
I don't use cruise control.
Yeah.
In fact, when I did a lot of my observing, I never used the drives on the telescope. I just hopped from star to star to find what it was I was looking for, and saw a lot of things that probably weren't on the map. So
Yeah.
it was great.
Yeah, you did a great job on that with that telescope.
I was star hopping one time, and as I was going from one area to another, I saw a blinking light. Did I tell you about that?
no.
Oh, yeah. As I was going across it, I saw a bright blinking light. And I said, whoa. So I went back to it. And it was going blink, blink, blink. And the first thing I noticed is when you look at celestial objects out there, you have to constantly move the telescope to counter the rotation of the Earth so you can keep observing this. This one, I didn't have to move the telescope. So this thing was synchronized with the Earth's rotation. And that's when I think, well, here they come.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about it.
Yeah.
And the only thing I could reasonably deduce was that I was looking at a meteorological satellite that had lost its stability in space, probably out about 25,000 miles, and that had lost its stability and was probably just turning like this and picking up the reflection off the sun. And
That makes sense.
And it's the only thing I could even begin to. And so I stopped worrying about the aliens.
Right. Well, we're all still here. None of us have been abducted, so I think that's
right.
probably a safe assumption, right? Yeah.
But that's the sort of stuff that when you're manually looking around the sky for different things, you see things that add to the excitement.
Yeah.
And you know, the astronomy industry itself, at least when we were younger, there was a group of what they call variable star observers that were basically amateurs that would be looking at the sky to see and record where there were variable stars, and then they would get them to a central location. So the amateurs played a large part in documenting that.
Sure.
And I think that's the thing. Bob, I told him he ought to have his charts looked at because I think he may have discovered some stuff.
Sure.
You know? And we'll make that at the other planetarium. We'll say, here's your project. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know?
But it's a wonderful hobby, and I would encourage anybody who likes to stargaze and then look at different things and test their eyes, because some of that stuff is very faint.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get to where you think it is, and then you have to kind of move the telescope a little bit and look for a slight fuzz. Those are mostly galaxies,
Yeah.
way off.
And when you do it, it's just very rewarding to be able to see these things. And Bob has observed a lot of very beautiful galaxies that don't get much attention. All we hear about is like the Andromeda Nebula or Orion Nebula or whatever.
Yeah.
But we don't hear about a lot of the other stuff. And then the pictures you get from these places that have been enhanced in some way don't really tell you what they really look like. So it's nice to be able to see it through a telescope, and Bob has done a lot of that. So
That's amazing.
and I still think, Bob, you got to get those to somebody. I don't know who yet. I'll find out. But
I observed about 1,800 objects
Wow.
over decades of hobby observing it.
He's done a great
I do
job.
remember one where I had, I think it was 7 or 8 galaxies in one field of view.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, didn't have to go around to find them. They
Yeah.
were all in the one field of view.
Well, see, that's the beauty of being in the amateur world, is it can be very rewarding. people just think, well, I'm going to look up at Mars, or maybe I'll look up at Jupiter and see the moons, and
Yep.
there's a lot more to see. It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
You know?
Winding things back a little bit towards the eclipse, you guys are here in town. You're talking about how you're bookending this chapter and this amazing life of sharing a love for astronomy together, and this prime opportunity in the United States to see it in 2024. So you guys drove here, you arrived here in Mount Vernon. We ran into you over breakfast here in this lobby. Right. So our stars aligned. What is this experience going to mean to you both? And I would love to hear both of your opinions and ideas around that. What does this mean?
Well, both Bob and I look at this as probably, and this is not to be morose or anything, but both of us are 85, 86 years old. The reality is there won't be another total solar eclipse probably in our lifetime where we're going to go.
Right.
So from our viewpoint, I think it looks like I said, a bookend, but it's also a happy moment because it shows that we've lived a long time, we've had a good life. Both Bob and I have been very satisfied with all the things we've done, and including in our personal life. I mean, our marriages, our losses of our spouses, our remarriages. There's a lot of mirroring in our in our life.
Parallelism. It's
just
surprising.
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
You know? And so from our viewpoint, it looks like a good way to go out.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I respect that.
There was one diversion, though. He went to the University of Michigan, or something, whereas I went to UCLA. So there was a real divergence.
That was it. Done. This whole thing was a sham.
That's right. It's too bad he didn't know about quality at the time. And so we're looking forward to just the experience of it. And when we were in the first one we went to was an experience because it was in a marshy area of Wisconsin, and I mean marshy.
Okay.
There were bugs and frogs and everything. And when that eclipse happened, and the bugs started chirping again, and the birds stopped chirping, and the whole business. It was really.
And you could see the shadow coming down.
I saw the shadow. Oh, it was.
And you saw it. You could see it moving.
And we really got a kick out of it.
It was an experience, and a lot of people I've talked to that even aren't into astronomy have been greatly impressed by experiencing a total eclipse, not the annular, but the total eclipse. Where you get the corona and you get the shadow, and it does, like Jim was saying. Birds if there are any birds chirping, they're probably going to stop.
They stop.
Yeah, right.
And it was just amazing. It was an amazing experience. So it'll be interesting to see what this is. The one we saw in 2017 was a couple of minutes long, and I was in Oregon. There was nothing really unique that affected the environment around us. We were in a place where it was relatively benign, so there wasn't the same feel. But I think in here, because of the fields and all this stuff, it's going to have a different feel.
Sure.
But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's great.
It should be a real good experience.
Southern Illinois has this real wonderful rural environment that's beautiful.
And then for your viewers, I learned something just recently as we were reading about the eclipses. And I did not know there's an eclipse called a hybrid eclipse.
What is that?
And a hybrid eclipse is one where it starts out annular, winds up total, and finishes annular.
Really?
And they're very rare.
What do you mean finishes? I don't understand.
It's an annular eclipse with the ring around it.
Okay.
It moves into position. And
you say it's moving towards the Earth at that point?
No, I'm saying the orbits are synced such that there's a change, and now the moon is close enough to the sun, to us, so that now it obscures it, becomes a total eclipse, and then it moves on during the eclipse path and becomes an annular again. And I read about that.
Later it becomes the annular.
But part of the same eclipse.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
all
interesting.
part of
You'll
the
have to
same thing.
explain that to me.
Yeah.
We won't do it on film.
I looked just astounded. It's one of these that happens multiple years.
I don't
between.
quite understand. Okay, so the moon moves in front of the sun. Okay, now let's just freeze it there.
Yeah, but the
Okay,
moon is
but the
at a
moon is
distance.
close to the Earth.
No, it's
so-
further away.
No,
from
no,
it.
I'm just talking, just mechanically now.
Yeah,
So the moon is in front of the Earth.
right.
Okay, let's stop everything. Now we move it towards the Earth, and we have a real total eclipse with corona
That's
and
correct.
everything. But now we have to move it thousands of miles away from Earth
That's exactly
so
right.
that it doesn't quite cover up
That's exactly right.
the sun, and now we see a circle.
annular.
How can that happen in just
Because
a minute or
because
two?
the two orbits are out of sync, and the one you got to remember that the orbit is not. Well, I won't go through the whole thing.
No,
But,
we're
But
in
the
this-
orbits are not synced, and so the one now can move further away faster than the one that's over
all
here.
within a minute or two.
Within no, not necessarily a minute.
Well,
It's
that's when
over-
you have
no,
the
no,
total.
No. Over the total length of the transit, the whole Earth transit, in that period. Okay, so
He went to the University of Michigan.
what do I know?
Oh, I love it. I'm just like feeling the energy from Bob right now. That's great.
I'm having
But
mechanical
it's true.
problems.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's show me.
But I'm simple-minded, and I will
yeah,
admit that.
yeah.
I'm very simple.
I'll explain it to you.
Oh my goodness.
been a
I just,
lifetime of doing
physically,
that, you know?
we're just talking about that moon moving towards or away from the Earth
Yeah.
in a matter of a few seconds, and so many miles that it goes from a perigee place
To an apogee.
to an apogee in a matter of just a minute
But it
or
doesn't
two.
take much.
Well, but that's thousands of miles.
Yeah, but
difference.
when you look at the angular part of it, Bob, I'll have to show you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a video somewhere that's got an explanation.
Yeah, well, it's in the, you can read it on the internet, but it's,
Are you
I-
going to write the article, Jim?
no. That's a thought. I hadn't thought about that.
Hey, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, you could just say, I know somebody who's having a
Yeah.
problem with this concept. And
Yeah.
here's
Well,
how it
is.
really
I mean, it is a tough one to do, and
Yeah.
it may also have to do with the way, positioning of the Earth at the time, too. It's a very strange one. Yeah.
Well, you
So-
do get some strange stuff
Yeah.
in science.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's right, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's
But see,
needs
this is
additional information.
This is a good example of what astronomy can do for you. It opens up doors and windows and
Right.
non-believers.
Yeah. Conspiracy
Or,
theorists
or
alike.
just people who are disciplined
Yes,
and need
yeah.
facts to substantiate the statement.
That's right. Well, yeah, that's right. We'll get those for you. So that'll be another 75 years.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm incredibly excited for you both to experience it. We're, of course, struggling with clouds being a
Yeah.
threat tomorrow, and we're maybe 12, or not 12 hours, but 18 hours, something of the sort, away from the event. And we're just going to, you guys are going to be driving around, we're going to be driving around, doing our best we can. And there's something to the thrill of the hunt, right?
There is.
And I hope that you see it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I hope you get to see it,
Experience
too.
it, everybody that's made the effort to see it.
And what we said to you earlier this morning was that if we can't see it, we're going to try and just film the darkness that will occur during the
Yeah.
eclipse around us and watch
I may
this
take a couple
surrounding-
shots of him,
Right.
when the moon isn't over the sun, just to get an exposure. But I'll keep the same F ratio and the same speed on the shutter, and then you can compare as he gets dimmer and dimmer, and then disappears.
Yeah, which is what he's hoping to see.
Yeah.
He's saying he'll show his family, here's the eclipse. Don't worry about Jim, he's somewhere around.
He's
No,
gone.
I won't say that. I'm just going to say this is a symbolic representation of Jim's intellect. let's look and see what happens here.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But we know it'll come back. So.
Yeah.
Right.
No matter how stupid he gets, we know that he will come back to his present intelligence.
That's right. It may take a while.
But we sure wish you
Yeah, we wish you a lot of luck on your
you
stuff.
and Doug
And I just love your stuff. Your photos are fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
yeah, you
Yeah, I-
really have professional quality
Yeah, I mean,
and
these are-
artistic ability
Yeah.
too. It's not just the professional.
Yeah, you were able to frame
It's,
these things in,
yeah,
in a way that's very, I think, very attractive.
Thank you. Yeah, I would definitely pride myself as more in the artist and less the scientific side, but I love trying to get closer to the middle of that and finding the sweet spot and getting both of those factors alive in my shots, whatever it is.
Have you contacted Sky and Telescope to see if they might be interested in some of the stuff you've done?
It's a good question. I never have. I just had a friend a few weeks ago become an editor's choice pick with one of her photos of the Thor's Helmet Nebula, and she just got picked for that. So I have a friend who just had an interaction with them, and it's starting to inspire me to to
And
do
there
that
is another
too.
magazine called Astronomy now that's, I think, a competitor to Sky and Telescope.
And then, there needs to have different points of view.
And I think
stuff.
both those would probably be interested in
Yeah.
those pictures.
And there may come a time in your life when you get really involved with your observing.
Yeah.
I would suggest you go down to southern Arizona, south
Yeah.
of Tucson, and
Yeah.
a little bit to the west. That's good dark sky down there.
Yeah.
And
You wanna go-
you'll see things in the southern sky that you can't see here because
Sure.
because of the Earth's curvature. But
Right.
there's a galactic or a open cluster that I bumped into down there below the constellation of Canis Major. That I looked at that and I said, now that's what an open cluster should
Yeah.
look like. It was
It's
beautiful.
right on the horizon.
Just about a little bit down there,
Yeah.
down in the Tucson area. It was maybe a few degrees above the horizon.
Have you ever taken a cruise? Or
I never have.
well, if you take a cruise and you get out in the middle of the ocean, and
Oh yeah.
when they turn the lights off and
Yeah.
you stand on the back of the ship and look up, it's going to blow you away.
Yeah.
There are no lights out there.
yeah,
you
there's-
know, and it's great.
Lights have ruined
Yeah.
a lot of the hobbies of amateur astronomy.
Yeah, there was an article just recently in the paper, or one magazine that I saw that showed the darkest area for observation in the United States. I can't tell you because I don't remember right now.
Was it in Nevada maybe?
Death
or-
Valley.
It was someplace that I hadn't really realized was quite as dark.
Oh, okay.
And
It was a
but
sort
it
of
was
more
in the
south.
west. It was in the west.
West, yeah.
As opposed to the east. I mean, the east is just like, there's nothing
Yeah, it's just a
sacred
glow.
there.
You know.
Right.
The sky. I mean, it's
And you
just,
see in some of the astronomy
you're lucky to
magazines,
see the moon when it's.
they'll show you all the lights.
Right.
Yeah. Europe is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just full of lights,
Yeah.
and it's a shame.
It is.
Yeah, because I grew up. Boy, you got out of the Chicago area just a few miles. You
And you
looked
could
up, and you
see-
could see the Milky Way go all
Yeah?
the way down
Oh,
to
my
the
goodness.
horizon.
And you could see they actually had the Aurora Borealis a couple times in
Yeah.
Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing that.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, I have too.
And the sky was clear enough to see it. That was like in the 50s, 51, 52.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about Bob and our relationship in terms of meeting is when we were younger, when Bob was below 12 and I was below 12, we lived within 3 blocks of each other in Chicago. He lived on 65th
66,
and
18 Woodlawn.
I lived at
yeah.
6101 with one. We never met.
Yeah.
Just that 4 blocks.
Yeah.
And we never met. And he used to play in the same, it was an old post office that had
Oh
been,
yeah,
that had
that
been
deserted
wrecked.
post office.
And
Yeah.
we used to go there. I used to go there all the time and play inside. It was like a cave.
Were you the guy that came after me that
No,
I had
no.
to flip over my?
No, I
head?
would have been frightened. I would have run.
That's what I did after I flipped this guy. I ran for it.
But it's an amazing coincidence that we were. It's almost like you believe in some sort of predestined situation because that was just a few
Yeah.
years before.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's absolutely amazing.
Well, Chicago is a crowded place.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think you're going to bump into almost everybody sooner or
we-
later.
Right.
Yeah, but we didn't. That's what was amazing.
Yeah.
The last thing I think I want to ask you guys, and it's more of I'm going to present the question, and then it's going to kind of have it redirected towards people who might be watching this, which is
Oh, good God.
it's not as intimidating as you think. But it's definitely keeping the viewer in mind here. But you guys have this huge life experience, sharing a love of eclipses, astronomy, space exploration,
And girls.
and
Yeah.
and the ladies.
But
Yeah,
that took
yeah,
longer.
yeah, the females.
And in Bob, in my case, took a long time.
They were so frightening.
They were both so shy, I couldn't stand it. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
But you got the girl in the end, right?
In the end, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they got us. I'm
Yeah.
not so sure.
So you have this shared experience, this shared love of astronomy, space, and discovery, and witnessing these cool events like the one we're going to try to see tomorrow. What is your best advice to upcoming generations who maybe might miss something like this because they just don't know it exists? So how would you encourage them to get interested in astronomy and to make the effort to go see something like an eclipse?
Well, I always had an interest in astronomy, and my uncle, when I was 10 or 11 or something, bought me a little telescope, a refractor telescope, and it was a variable power. And I went out and mounted on something, and I looked at a star, and it had a power of 40 to it. And I looked at the star, and it was a big circle, and I thought, my God, well, 40 power
Yeah.
will blow up the star so that you can see it, big round thing in there. And I was excited until I realized, probably I bumped the telescope,
You were out
it
of focus.
changed. I was out of focus.
Yeah, it's a little donut, right?
And by the time I finally learned, it was down to a little pinpoint of light again, and it almost discouraged me. But that's what really turned me on to observing, though, is I then started moving around. You get to see things you've never seen before, and I loved it. And you're getting to see a little bit of the cosmos,
Right.
and it's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing I would say also is that when you take the time to really just even a few visits to a planetarium or an observatory in your area, you should do it because it will allow you to see with some professional equipment what it really looks like. And don't sell yourself short on buying equipment because there's a lot of equipment on the market that is good, that you can have good observations with, like Bob's telescope it's a little expensive, it's not terribly.
But in a way, it's like yours. It's an 8-inch diameter
an
mirror,
8-inch
so we're
diameter.
collecting about the same amount of light.
And so taking that experience and then buying yourself even the cheapest or least expensive, as long as you keep it in focus, which I guess I have two explanations I have to give him now.
Yeah, right. The first is a hybrid eclipse,
The hybrid
and now
eclipse.
it's how to focus your image.
I mean, you
Whole
know.
career of astronomy,
Yeah.
all out of focus.
That's right. But also, when you read articles in the paper, just follow them. You'll find out they'll talk about comets that may be visible, which you can see with the naked eye, and it's kind of fun to go out and see where they say it might be, and that kind of gets you stimulated. And just the awesomeness of the universe is what I think, from my viewpoint anyhow, is it's amazing. It's the most amazing thing there is,
Yeah.
And you just can, from philosophy to science to anything, it's just amazing.
Sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if you like challenges,
Yeah.
you get yourself a really good set of star maps. It shows the location of
Yeah.
galaxies and stuff like that. And the challenge is to actually see them. And you don't want to press buttons.
Right.
You want to find them by yourself.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know?
That's part of the fun,
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
And,
Yeah, but nowadays the telescopes you
But-
just press in what you want.
but I-
NGC 1315, you
Yeah.
just press it in and it
But
goes
there
right
are
to
people, Bob, that I think would do well with that.
it. Yeah.
There are people that
Yeah.
don't
I drive a
want to
stick
do it.
shift car still.
Yeah, you
There you
still
go.
Yeah.
You think maybe people who went to University of Michigan?
Yeah,
might-
that's right.
Yeah, he just drives automatic,
Yeah.
automatic systems.
Yeah, I mean, I'm spoiled by now.
Yeah, right.
Well, I had to. In Michigan, it's an auto state, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's
except
right.
except that I have a Toyota, so
Oh goodness.
Yeah, so,
So do I, Jim.
yeah, we both
Yeah.
have been Toyota fans.
Oh man.
But yeah, But yeah, there's a lot to be learned.
Yeah.
So, and I would encourage anybody to get into astronomy. Take a course. I mean, it's simple. Really, it isn't as complicated as people make it sound.
Right.
And you can really learn a lot. And the history of astronomy is fascinating. Just who were the early observers? Who were the early scientists? It's fascinating. Yeah. So that's my advice.
Fantastic. Well, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you both for taking this time tonight to sit with me,
Yeah,
some
we
guy I
enjoyed
met
it. We
12
enjoyed
hours
it.
ago, and it's been so energizing and inspiring to me to see your friendship, your knowledge in optics, astronomy, and
And
everything.
you have healthy curiosity, and that's what advances man is healthy curiosity
have it.
and imagination. And
How boring life would be if we weren't able to do that.
Right.
know? Yeah.
Well, I think there's an important responsibility to relaying information, just like you guys are bringing equipment and things to Adler so that other people can learn from it later.
we hope, yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping that
Yeah.
that they appreciate the learning process between 1950 and today. And I think they will, based on some of the articles that we have in the paper, plus some of the photographs we have, I think they'll understand there's been it's a big change over what they're doing now. I'm not, as Bob says, we're not sure how they're going to receive that.
Sure.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well, it's worth a shot.
You know, we're going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to taking this and being in a different direction, a relay of that same information and inspiration to other people.
I hope.
I think you guys, I hope you feel some of that return and energy back to you guys, and I'm grateful for you sharing
thank
that
you.
with me.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm gonna shake your guys' hands. Thank you, Jim.
Certainly enjoyed it.
Thank you, Bob.
Hey, you
guys
bet,
are great.
Nick.
Yeah.